it's difficult to comply with the both the DEC and OER deadlines for comments.
Right.
So I guess, maybe we'll take them on a case by case basis if, we do run into that.
Since this is a small audience and everybody knows each other, I'm curious. We haven't been asked very frequently to present at board meetings. I was curious about the new formal interest.
Well, we've done it more. I mean, it seems like there's a tidal wave. Development. I mean,
Yes.
There's been a tidal wave of development in our neighborhood for 15 years, but
yes, there has.
Ongoing. But it seems like after as the pandemic has gone through its waves, but it seems to be proliferating again, and so the cleanup programs have proliferated, and then just there seems to be a cluster of ones that seem to raise eyebrows a little bit, either the extent of contamination or it's in a location, that so it's more about that. Yeah, I don't think.
I understand.
Yeah, I don't think we've had OER in a long time.
No.
Just we had them in at the end of last month about River Ring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, but we've had DEC in more often.
Right.
With various, but yeah, there's no way that we can address everyone. I mean, there was a couple that we, other sites that came through that, they don't have the capability to handle all of those.
Yeah, something else I know that, so the presentation I have to give this evening is same framework that Mark and Shaminder presented last week. And so if it's if the audience is the same, then, I can, if I'm aware of that, I can definitely be more efficient and leave more time for discussion. But if there are people who didn't see that, then I'd be definitely happy to go through more of the background information as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be good to have that in this, the meeting's being recorded, so people have the opportunity to play back.
Okay.
I just remember that some of the maps, like the well locations and the notations were a bit tiny and hard to read. So when we get to those, if those slides come up, maybe just try and zoom in a bit on those. Yeah, but I think the way we've slated tonight, we're going to address 1036 Manhattan first, and then Greenpoint Landing. So,
right.
But right now, we're hoping more community members will file in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rare occasion that we'll have 2 meetings within a few weeks. Normally, we do a monthly basis, but just we had these 2 we had 4, significant items that we wanted to address, and mindful of, the comment deadlines. So in our board meeting next week, there's Katie. Hey, Katie.
Hi.
Yeah, the snow's almost gone, huh? Well, speaking of, saw it's just incredible with whenever it rains, just seeing the sheens and on the pavement in the street and on the sidewalks, just how much product that vehicles are leaving behind. And there's one, I live on Manhattan Avenue on the block of India between McGinnis and Manhattan. I'd say half of the sidewalk had a sheen going down. I don't know if it was just from a heating oil delivery or something, but
in the street, Steve?
It was on the sidewalk.
Oh.
Yeah. I thought, I said, this is one of the most amazing chalk designs that children have ever created, but just went on for too long. Yeah. All right, Trina, good to see you. Hey, William. So maybe we'll just wait a few more minutes, see if a couple more members.
So Steve, can you hear me? Steve, maybe you're on mute.
I am on mute. Struggling with the button tonight. Yeah, if we wait, see if a couple more members come in to achieve quorum.
I just left the New Kings Democrat meeting about the remaps. So Greenpoint looks like it's going to be pretty much intact with the remapping, you know. So, but it's other parts of our assembly district is going to be gone.
Well,
Most
I
of
understand the
my
northwest
neighbors.
part of Greenpoint is going to Senate District 17 to Generis.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that for the
Where's
most
the
part,
line? Where does it split?
I think I forwarded you the map. I didn't forward you the map, Trina, because I have your email address. After the meeting, I'll forward those who have their email address the latest looking map. But hopefully it's all done by Friday.
Yeah, there's a really cool map. I'll try to find the link. I don't know if I can, they don't do comments, right? There's a really cool map where you can go back and forth between the new district and the old district and kind of overlay them so you can kind of see.
Oh,
I'll check in with you guys later about that.
yeah. It's just that 90% of my neighbors are in the new district.
Wow.
In Nydia's?
I don't know what. It's just it's not part of the ADC 50th. So
Oh, yeah.
Cooper Housing, which I was going to get people involved with we do our county committee things for Democrat Party, and my neighbors towards Cooper Housing, who are members of my political club, are no longer part of it. It's just crazy. But this map looks like the best. It keeps, for the most part, us intact, the progressive reformers together.
It sounds like they're doing what they did once before by redistricting part of the environmental justice community out of the community. Makes it easier for them.
Well, this was going to be about legislation. When you have one party controlling the governorship, the assembly, the senate, it's always going to be political. It's only when you have a split powership, then they finally get, work something out. So it was always going to be going, whatever party that's in control like this, it's going to be political.
All right.
Got a lot of bodies here, Steve, now, all of a sudden.
Yeah, look, we have quorum. I'm just jotting that down.
Hey, Steve and folks, I'm sorry I'm late. It's Eric.
So that's okay. No, I appreciate, we just achieved quorum. And I really thank both, the committee members, and I see committee members here coming up twice within a month. But these two items and the previous two items seem very, very important to the community. And I thank Jane Connell from DEC for coming and presenting again. And we have Zach from Office of Environmental Remediation and some of their colleagues here. So I think we can proceed here. I might as well, Jerry, minding the controls tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Could you please take a roll call?
Stephen Chesler,
Here.
Eric Brusadas,
Here.
T. Willis Elkins,
Here.
Katie Denny Horowitz,
Sure.
Yoel Lowe, Trina McKeever,
Here.
Janice Peterson, Bella Sable, Laura Hoffman,
Here.
Kevin Costa, Daniel Grossman.
Here, hello everyone.
7 members answering the call.
Great, thank you. Hey, Dan, good to see you. So
Steve, you're mute again.
thank you. Having struggling with the mute button tonight. Forgive me. We're going to deal with 1036 Manhattan Avenue first with DEC, and then after presentation, we'll ask Jane to field questions and comments. And then we'll formulate, response if necessary and take a vote. And then OER will present about Greenpoint Landing. And then old business and new business. And some of the old business, just previous coming attractions. Jerry, I thought, very astutely at the last meeting brought up the relocation of the CSO outlet at River Ring. And just, I feel like that's something, it's not related to remediation per se, but something to explore as far as where they're considering relocating and how that might affect nearby communities, et cetera. So, but we'll get back to that. So without further ado, Jane, feel free to take it away.
All right. Hi, Steve. Hello to the committee. Nice talking to you again. Second time in a couple of weeks. I'm going to share my screen now. And give me 1 second. Are you able to see this? Wait, hang on. Yes, allow. Why is this not allowing me? All right, let's try again.
I'm going to ask or is anyone from the developers team here for 1036 Manhattan?
I don't think so. I notified their consultant about it, but they did not. I don't know. They did not. They did not indicate that they were going to be coming.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I am for some reason having difficulty sharing my screen. You may have to give me permission to share.
Not with this system. It's self-serve at the bottom of the screen where you see share.
All right, I see share, and it says share content. I could share screen or share application. And I'm trying to share my screen, and it says we can't display your shared content. Share.
Is there another someone else in your team who could?
Well, unfortunately, my project manager has not called in, and I just texted her. I do have DOH on the phone, but I don't know if they have a copy of the final presentation that I put together.
Can you email it to the community board?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, or to me, and I'll.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I can try and forward that to you. I apologize. Okay. Can I just reply back to this invitation?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, attach. For some reason I didn't have this trouble last time, but I'm seeming to have trouble this time. I don't know why.
My screen is showing that you are the presenter, so.
Can you see this? Can you see this presentation?
No, it's just my screen is indicating that you are a presenter. So you have the control.
I'm desperately trying to share my screen, believe me. All right, let me try and email this to you. I apologize. Did you use a different was it Zoom last time? I think I had less trouble with that for some reason.
No, City only pays for WebEx for us.
I see. All right, I am having difficulty here. Let me see if I can find the original presentation. If you want to let OER start, perhaps maybe I can try and get this straightened out. I'm having a little bit of difficulty.
Jane, do you want to forward the presentation?
Do you have it, Scarlett?
I do. I just have it on my laptop because the laptop doesn't work on WebEx. So I can't get.
I mean, I have it. I have it. I just have to find it from the email that I sent it to.
Okay, should
when
we,
I- when
so
I-
maybe we should, we'll flip things and switch to Greenpoint Landing. So Zach, do you want present now instead, and then we'll revert back to 1036 Manhattan?
Sorry,
fine.
Zach.
That's okay, Jane. That's fine for me. Let me see if I can share. That seems to be working on my end. You see that?
Yes.
All right, great. Let me launch this. Okay, great. So thank you, Steve. Thank you to the Environmental Protection Committee for having us at this meeting this evening. We recently released the fact sheet one, the application fact sheet for 16 DuPont Street, which is one of the projects that is being constructed as part of the Greenpoint Landing development. And I understand that that's the the driver for this presentation this evening. So I'll jump right in. I'm here with Shaminder Chawla, the Deputy Director of OER. And I also have the developer representative, Eric Selbst from the LLC, who is
How do you spell his last name?
Selbst, right, Eric? Do I have it right?
That's correct.
And Greg Wyka from Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. The LLC is Greenpoint Landing Lot 6 LLC. And yeah, so so we have some folks here to answer questions this evening as they come up. For the people who are not familiar, I'm from the Office of Environmental Remediation. We work out of the Mayor's Office, and we oversee the operation of the E-designation program, which is a zoning-based hazardous materials cleanup program. And we also run the city's voluntary cleanup program in parallel as a cleanup program that can be entered by projects that are not E-designated. E-designated properties can also enter. The voluntary cleanup program was designed to manage low and moderately contaminated brownfield sites that wouldn't necessarily have a home at the state level. We do, however, work with DEC and the Department of Health at the city level, and occasionally on the state level when it's warranted, on all of the projects and remedies that we develop. And in a lot of cases, we identify sites that need a higher level of engagement, and I shouldn't say engagement, more technical engagement, and then they would work with the state to work through the remedial requirements that fall on the type of contamination that's identified on the site. The voluntary cleanup program requires that there are opportunities for community participation, and throughout the program, both the E-designation and the voluntary cleanup program, we have a lot of measures that we implement to make sure that the remedy and the related construction are protective and don't result in impacts to the surrounding communities. This is a flow chart of our program, and we are currently at the fact sheet one component here, where there's an opportunity for public comment on the remedial action work plan that's been proposed. We have already undergone the initial steps here. A remedial investigation was conducted last year, and we worked with the team to develop a remedial action work plan. We consulted DEC at the end of 2021, and then have proceeded to put the draft plan out for public comment. I'll come back to this slide to round this out at the end. The site we're talking about is at the corner of DuPont and the new extension of West Street. It's almost directly across from the Greenpoint Playground and Newtown Barge Park, and across from the new development toward the East River and the vacant lot to the east. You can see this is the Greenpoint Landing assemblage of lots and projects. The parcel we're working on is pretty much in the center of this. The proposed development, according to the information we've been provided by the development team to date, this will be a 40-story mixed-use building. There will be retail, underground parking, and in the upper floors there will be residential amenities. The building will have around 380 apartments, 30% of which will be available at some level of affordability, and there will be public access to the future underground parking and the ground floor retail. Historically, this property has been used for lumber purposes. In the last half of the 20th century, the DEC sludge tank was located here until it was dismantled in 2014. There was a tow yard here for about 30 years, starting in the mid-80s. And in the surrounding areas, as you're all well aware, there are pretty standard issues related to releases from petroleum storage and fuel oil and things like that. And something else that's here that you're all very aware of is the New Hart Superfund site, which is to the north and east a block away, Franklin and DuPont. Langen conducted the environmental investigation, the remedial investigation in early 2021, excuse me. They characterized the standard media that we work with in our program, soil, groundwater, and soil vapor. They confirmed the presence of a 1,000-gallon fuel oil tank on site. And there is on this site, as part of the construction of the building to the south, which was Greenpoint Landing E3, a sewer line that was constructed, and now there's an easement on this property, this E1 site. So that's part of that's being taken into consideration as this lot is being developed. The investigation scope is summarized here. Very generally, historic fill on site ranged to depths of up to 11 feet. The soil was contaminated with moderate low levels of SVOCs, semi-volatile organic compounds, PCBs, and pesticides. Nothing extraordinary here, pretty standard historic fill material. In the groundwater, which is around 9 to 11 feet below the surface, similar contaminants at similarly low levels were identified. And soil vapor on site was also pretty moderately contaminated. Not much to generate significant concern here in terms of the volatile organic carbons that were identified. So all in all, a fairly minorly contaminated site. I don't know if that's helpful, Steve. Yes, that we can zoom in. So this is the scope of the investigation. The triangles are the soil vapor points. The circles are where soil borings were completed, and the squares are soil borings with monitoring wells that were also completed. So this is generally the scope of the investigation. And this is the new building to the south here. This is the sewer easement, and this is the approximate location of the tank that will be managed as excavation begins. So once the investigation was completed, as I said, we worked with Langen and the developer to develop a remedial action work plan. As is the case with all of our projects, we consulted DEC on the work plan that was developed, and we also asked for the Department of Health's review as a standard part of our program. And in this way, our program mirrors the state cleanup program in the review by the Department of Health, and ensure that different perspectives are given to the remedial plan that's being proposed, and that make sure that things are being done properly. The public comment for this project runs through February 19th, so about 2 weeks away. And in general, the remedy that we've developed, very straightforward. Because there wasn't any indication of a release or high levels of soil vapor contamination or groundwater issues, the excavation here, which will extend to, for the most part, 17 feet. In the cores of the building, it'll extend to up to 29 feet. There's going to be a lot of excavation, which will result in the removal of all of the fill material that was identified on site as being contaminated. This makes it a pretty straightforward dig and haul project. As I said, the groundwater is relatively shallow here at 11 feet. And that means that there's going to be a significant amount of dewatering. Likewise, there will be a waterproofing system that above the water table will act as a vapor barrier to manage any sort of area-wide vapor issues that may exist in the future, and then areas of the site that are not built out with occupiable space will have a composite cover system above any material that's left in place. A really important part of OER's programs is the community protection elements that we build in. You can find at the beginning of the remedial action plan that's available for public comment on our website, the community protection statement. This gives you a very high level, accessible description of the measures that are being put in place to ensure that this project doesn't have any negative environmental health impacts on the community. We undertake, through the efforts of the environmental consulting team, community air monitoring program during the remedial work on site. The consultant and the development team report to OER during all of the remedial work on site. And we have a construction health and safety plan in place to make sure that worker safety is front and center in our considerations when we're making sure that these sites are being run properly. This is a picture of the excavation that's going to be completed. I don't know if I can make this. The gray here is 17 feet, and the orange here extends from 22 to 29 feet. Just to give you a general idea, we're going to have a small plaza at the front here, and there will be I think a small courtyard in the rear of the property here. So now I'm going to jump into some of the details of the remedy, and start with, as I said, the type of foundation that's going to be constructed here. It's going to be a sheet and pile construction. There will be a small section of the foundation wall that is secant wall to provide supportive excavation and effectively underpinning for the building to the south. As those sheets are driven in, the groundwater flow will be cut off from the surrounding area, and it'll make dewatering a lot more efficient and effective. And then in the core of the building, those orange deep excavation areas, there are going to be additional piles that are driven down to approximately 40 feet or so to place them to the extent possible on bedrock. And as this goes on in stages, the soil will be removed from the property. So you can see on the left here is a schematic of how secant wall looks like. In the middle, we have some piles being driven, and on the left here, you have some sheeting that's been driven into the ground. On the right, I'm sorry, on the right. Give you an idea of what and I know everyone here knows what this looks like, because as Steve said before we started, there's been a lot of work going on in this neighborhood for over a decade and a half. So definitely going to have some excavators on site. We'll have trucks that are being loaded and leaving the site with the material to properly permitted facilities. As these piles are installed, there will be localized excavation around the piles. And all of this soil management will be managed under all of the regulations and requirements locally, state, and I don't think it affects the site, but in some situations, federal regulations. So manifests, making sure that the soil is being disposed of in the right place, and that we can document it from beginning of the chain of custody to the end of chain of custody. There will be dewatering here. The development team is in the process of obtaining the permits from DEP for dewatering. It's an example of it. Yes?
Coming from here, right? Sounds like it's coming from your phone.
Janet, can you please mute?
Yes, I could. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Maybe.
So here's an example of what dewatering looks like. Here's another image of the sheet piles that will be installed around the perimeter of the site. Tank removal is something you'll see. Hopefully won't draw any attention. It's an old fuel oil tank, and if things go well, it can be removed without any problems, cleaned and dismantled and disposed of off-site. The team will make sure that they document that there was no release, and if there was an indication of release, that'll be managed properly, registered with the state for proper oversight. At the end of the remedial plan, at the remedial excavation, samples will be collected from the bottom of excavation to document any material that's being left in place that requires long-term management, or documentation that all material is removed and that the project has effectively completed a permanent cleanup. As the construction of the project comes back out of the hole, you'll start to see materials being imported. For the most part, these materials, if they're anything granular, will go through OER review to make sure that material being imported to the site is as clean or cleaner than anything that left the site. And at the end of the excavation, the vapor barrier waterproofing membrane will be installed. You can see the footprint of that here, excluding the small courtyard area, going all the way up to grade along the foundation walls. A slab will be completed across most of the site, and the small plaza will perhaps be landscaped. It's not completely defined yet, and we'll make sure that if there is any material underlying this plaza, I imagine all of it's coming out with the excavation, but if anything is here, then we'll make sure that the proper cover is in place in that plaza. Some ideas of how a vapor barrier installation looks: large plastic sheets installed, penetrations are sealed properly. While all of this is going on, as said, we're going to maintain our high level of community involvement and protection. We have a construction health and safety plan to make sure that the people closest to the material that's being handled are protected, the workers. The community air monitoring plan ensures that we know what is coming on site and, if anything, what is coming off site. And there are triggers in place to cause work to stop, and there are measures in place to manage any odor, dust, or other issues that would potentially present a nuisance to the surrounding community. We have measures in place to ensure that trucks leaving the site are not tracking dirt all over the place, and that in general, the site is maintained in a way that's minimally disruptive to the community. We make sure that the trucking companies understand truck route requirements and are alerted to sensitive receptors. We have a park and a playground across the street here. People will be walking in the neighborhood, and that's something that we've spoken with the development team about. That is a very tight corner of Greenpoint, and we're just reminding everybody involved that trucking is very sensitive here, that speeding trucks have been an issue in the past, that we wanted to make sure they were aware of that, and access to the park in a safe way is also essential as this project advances. Community air monitoring. The team will have stationary stations on site, and they'll be doing some continuous monitoring. Somebody will be at the point of excavation, making sure that they're at the front line to prevent any issues from getting beyond where this local excavation is. And all this is documented in the reports and in documentation that we can request at any time if an issue arises, but which finally is put together in the final report for the project. We make sure that dust protection, dust control, and mitigation are really key to the projects that we're working on. It's the main way that contamination from our sites typically can leave site if it's not done properly. So we cover our stockpiles. We make sure that the site is dampened when necessary, spraying, and on bigger sites we would use some kind of water truck. If during the tank excavation, for example, some contaminated soil were identified, then measures are in place to ensure that there are no or minimal odors that leave the site, and use foams and other sorts of odor control to ensure that that is not an issue. Rain runoff from the site is something that there's a plan in place for, so that we don't have material leaving the site into the roadways. This is an image of a truck pad to make sure that we are washing the tires and we're not tracking material all over the neighborhood. And this is a relatively small site, so they might be doing direct loading onto the street. That's something we haven't gotten to the details of. That's something we'll talk about with the team as we move toward the commencement of construction. We have truck routes in the plan to make sure that everybody's aware of what the legal truck routes are. And all of this goes along with a large amount of communication and reporting to OER. We get daily reports during construction and remediation. We make sure that everybody on the team understands if there are any issues that the community brings to the site, those should be immediately brought to OER because we're going to hear about it anyway. The earlier we know, the better we're able to address those and work towards a solution that everybody can live with. If there are changes to the project or interim approvals, OER is involved at different milestones in completion, bottom of excavation, the beginning and completion of the vapor barrier installation. OER is also involved in that. So OER, the project manager for this project is William Quinones, did a great job with this presentation. So thanks for that, Will. He's going to be monitoring all of this and receiving this reporting. And at the end of the project, Will and I will make sure that everything was documented properly and pull it all together to document the successful cleanup that we're anticipating here. So the next steps are at the completion of public comment. We'll address any public comments that come in, make any revisions that are necessary to the remedial action work plan. We'll put together a decision document, and when the team is ready, we'll meet for a pre-construction meeting and revisit all of these safety, nuisance, site hygiene measures, issues, community protection that we've discussed here this evening. And then construction would start, and then ongoing reporting would commence through the closeout of the project. So with that, be happy to take any questions. These are the folks that are involved. And thank you.
Thanks a lot, Zach, for it was a great presentation. Yeah, I think we'll open it up to committee members and board members first, and then to the general public. Since one of the last things you talked about were trucks, I wanted to ask, number one, do you have an estimation of the volume of trucks, say, and I guess the duration of the excavation and any filling that would go on, and potentially the number of trucks? And then I just want to mention, besides the issue with trucks barreling down residential streets illegally, is truck idling. I've just heard incessant complaints from neighbors with trucks pulling up, from New Jersey at 2 in.the morning, idling, talking, and people try and confront them. It's been pretty nasty. People have been threatened. So that's a real issue. So I really encourage you and the developers here to be really, and the environmental consultant to be very mindful of that. Because there's a affordable housing building, as you presented, right next door, playground across the street,
Yep.
park across from that, and lots of parents, lots of children nearby.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. When Eric and Greg and I spoke yesterday, we definitely spoke about idling and trying to stage the trucks so that we don't have enormous number of trucks lining up in the street at one time, posting no idling signs, making sure the construction manager walks down the line and has people turn their trucks off if they are idling. And we definitely discussed flag person. And so I can assure you that we're going to be reminding the teams of that and fielding any concerns from the community as they come in if those issues arise, and relaying those to the development team. In terms of volume and frequency of trucks, I am not able to speak to that. I don't know if the development team, Eric or Greg, if you're that far along in planning that you can speak to that, or from experience on other Greenpoint landing sites.
I'm not familiar with that, but perhaps Greg is familiar.
Yeah, I'll say that, I mean, in general, I feel like, maybe we're on the order of 20 trucks, 20, 30 trucks a day. I mean, it all depends on, the contractor's phasing and sequencing. But I think given the size of the site and how deep we're going and the logistics of getting all that soil out of the hole, it's going, and the fact that we're not going to be able to, stage a lot of soil for export is going to have to be direct loaded. I think that's going to keep down the number of daily trucks.
You know, the approximate duration of that process of excavation and fill?
Eric, do you have is there a preliminary construction schedule available, or generally speaking, like, 4 months, 6 months?
4 to 6 months is general, but we don't have a specific schedule yet.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the other thing is kind of one of the big elephants in the room that you alluded to, and I'm glad Jane is here, is the proximity to the Newhart Superfund site. And I know you didn't mention anything about phthalates in terms of your assessment of the contamination.
Nope.
But I guess, just the concern is, just the depth of the remediation, the excavation, and working with groundwater, I guess, disturbing the plume. And if there's any concern about it, the migration of phthalates west towards, the other properties and this property.
Yeah, so just briefly, we also spoke about this. Greg reminded me of something that was done at Jane's request back during the construction of, I think, I don't know the addresses of the sites, of G1, the first tower that went up. But the sheet piling around this site is really intended to cut off groundwater flow when they begin dewatering. And that has been seen on other projects in the area to successfully essentially eliminate any impact on the plume based on ongoing monitoring. So that's me summarizing what Greg reminded me of yesterday. I'd be happy to kick that to Greg or to Jane to confirm or deny, but that's the expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I can, as you described, Zach, and as was done on some of the other sites, you're talking about doing the drilled secant wall. It has a very good hydraulic barrier, if you will. And there was quite a bit of dewatering done on some of the other development sites in the Greenpoint Landing area, and with also a significant amount of dewatering, and we did not see any impact on the phthalate plume or on the TCE plume for that matter.
You're muted.
Other folks have any questions or comments about that, or in general? Katie?
Yes, thank you. So two things. One is, thank you for describing the sort of mitigation of the impact on the community and understanding that, it's so close to Greenpoint Playground and so close to, Barge Park and the northern Greenpoint Landing. Is there anything beyond what you described that you think can be done to support those parks? I'm thinking about the noise, the potential spillover of trash, and how unpleasant it might be in those spaces while that's happening. And if there's anything we could do to support that. And my second question is, we have been exploring the possibility of using DuPont Street as an open street through the DOT program, sort of as an extension of Greenpoint Playground. And I wanted to ask about whether this would have an impact on that. Things like when you say 30 to 40 trucks a day, are you talking about Monday through Friday? Are you talking about weekends as well? I know sometimes you can get a permit for Saturdays, but that was a street that, we have spoken to neighbors and agencies about activating through volunteer cleanups and programming and educational programming to activate that kind of underused street. And so I wanted you to be aware of that and see if you had any advice.
So in terms of noise mitigation, the noise code does cover construction noise. So that is there and needs to be complied with. I've seen other sites being required to put measures in during especially noisy activities to reduce the noise that's being created from the site. In terms of truck traffic, in our conversation yesterday, I described what we worked with the developer at Transmitter Park, on the site next to Transmitter Park to do. So there are some possibilities. It really depends on street configuration and direction, what can be done in terms of the truck traffic and site access to what side of the site they're working from. So I think that's still all very, very much up in the air until the development plans are solidified. I definitely not in a position to speak to the open streets question. I don't know yet which side of the site's going to be used for access and what the permit seeking work periods will be.
When's the approximate start date of the remediation?
Hoping to start in the spring or early summer.
Steve, can I ask a follow-up? So when is the West Street extension opening up to the public? And do you feel like this is going to have an impact on West Street, which we're also looking at a potential open street?
Greg, that's supposed to be very soon, correct? You know?
Yeah, the street is pretty much finalized at this point, except for final striping and trees, which are going to be installed this spring. And I think once the official transfer occurs to the city, yeah, it's going to be it's this springtime, I believe. But yeah, just going back to the only streets that will be accessible for the site are West Street and DuPont. So I'm not sure what the construction manager has identified as, the main site entrance. They may have two. I'm not sure. And just going back to truck traffic, when I said 20 to 30 trucks, that may be cumulative throughout the whole day. Typically, trucks do runs. Depending on where the facility is ultimately located, they could do, they may do, it could be something like 10 trucks doing 2 runs, or, you know, 5 trucks doing 4 runs. It all depends. And usually, and most facilities are closed on weekends, so the trucking should only be Monday through Friday.
On West Street, primarily.
Well, West Street or DuPont, depending on what has to be outlined. The forget what the name of the plan is, but the construction site safety plan and other plans usually identify the entrance and exits on the site. And I am not sure, because that's not my scope. I'm not sure where those will be identified at. It could be one of the streets. It could be both.
I'm sorry, Trina. I see you have your hand up. If I could just ask one final question. So, I'm sorry, Trina. So I'm focusing on West Street also because there's one Huron, one Java, just south of obviously this site, that are also undergoing major construction. So essentially that would, so you're talking about additional truck traffic on top of theirs, and theirs. So have you actually kind of looked at, or communicated with them about the trucking on Northern West Street, given those 3 projects happening simultaneously this spring?
I don't think that conversation has happened yet, but there's definitely time to do that. And Zach will be asking our team to have a pre-construction kickoff meeting in advance of all this work, and that's another time where a lot of these concerns will be relayed and discussed, and sort of the final coordination decided on where we're going to be trucking from, how we're going to sequence it, explaining that trucks cannot be idling in the early morning when they're queued up ready for loadout and things like that. But that is noted, and we'll take that into consideration and speak to the other teams.
Just quickly piggybacking on that and jumping way ahead, beyond the remediation is just developers is the tower crane staging before they're erected. It's been a huge problem with just scores of flatbed trailers with different pieces of the tower crane filling up the bike lanes, mainly on West, but other streets as well. So that was a real hazard because bike lane does get so. Figure out alternatives for that down the line. That would because as Katie referenced, one Java is going to break ground soon, and one Huron is paused, but I'm sure it'll be starting up anytime soon. Trina.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So my question is more for the developers, understanding that this site is going to be remediated, it's going to be built. I like a lot of community members, I was around when Greenpoint Landing went through the ULURP process, and there was a promise made to put a school right there in Greenpoint Landing. And why is it that here you've got another building going up? Why isn't there a consideration now that you're saying that this is a clean site and you can build the building? Why isn't there a thought to put the school? Why isn't Greenpoint Landing being held to their promise to put a school in our community?
Eric?
Sorry about that. I can't speak on behalf of the master developer. However, there is a plan for a school site that is identified, but it's not this specific site, and I do not know the current plans of that one.
But it's on the footprint of Greenpoint Landing, because I know that our elected officials have been looking at sites up and down the waterfront. But part of the ULURP in the ULURP process, there was a promise made to the community to build a school at Greenpoint Landing.
That's correct.
I'll speak based on what I know. The school site has been, was determined to be the parcel that adjoins this site E1 to the east. That's always been the plan. What has happened is, the involvement with the community in New Hart and past council members, that has thrown a wrench into the equation. And
why isn't the new building, I mean, here you're building yet another building at part of Greenpoint Landing. Why isn't that building being considered as a site for the school? We're looking at other developers that are building towers, 40-foot towers up and down the waterfront, and asking other people to consider putting the school in. But the promise was made and the idea was floated, and that was part of the quid pro quo, the agreement, the ULURP agreement, to put the school at Greenpoint Landing. And I don't know how you guys can keep building more buildings and not put a school there.
I don't know, Jane, do you want to speak to that in some degree, given?
You're muted, Jane.
Well, just to be respect, the community is well aware of the issues with the site E. I mean, they made, it's directly adjacent to the phthalates plume and the New Hart site. So, and so basically, our former council member and the community said we just don't feel comfortable allowing to have our kids attend a school that would be built in that site. So, so the question is, you have approximately 11 buildings that are being constructed, to be flexible and they incorporate the school that was supposed to go there into your projects.
You're going to say something, or I saw you were going to talk and then you were muted. I don't know if you want to chime in.
You talking to me, Greg?
Yes, yes, I am.
I have nothing to do with where they're going to build the school.
Yeah.
So
You know,
sorry, I was-
we issued a record of decision.
Yeah.
At the time that the record of decision for Newhart was issued, the school parcel was identified as a school parcel. We put into the record of decision that there was going to be a cutoff wall there to protect that parcel, to make it safe for it to be built as a school. Then it went wherever it went. That has nothing to do with DEC. Our remedy will make it, that site protected to build whatever you want to build on it, but the council member in the community have just, are concerned, still have concerns about it. That doesn't have anything to do with DEC. We're going to do, the remedy that needs to be done. Where the school gets built is not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's good that the topic was broached here, but I recommend that the committee, get on, either the land use committee and or the education committee to continue discussing this issue and, trying to get the situation fixed. If we could, maybe revert back to the remediation. Laura, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, well, that's one of my concerns about the school. I feel that it's still unacceptable to be planning the school where it was originally planned. So yeah, we should be going back to what the councilman had started working on and follow up with the current councilman also. But I want to also go back to the presentation about the remediation of the property. I wish I could believe that that there's going to be proper odor and dust mitigation, but I don't believe it because we've gone through it all at Barge Park. 9 out of 10 times my 311 complaints weren't dealt with in a satisfactory way. Even follow-ups with say Park Tower and those entities, Greenpoint Landing, that that went down the tubes too, because the reality is they weren't able to correct the situations in real time. So 9 out of 10 times when we'd make complaints, my husband and I would end up being like park cops there, actually interfering with the trucks and interfering with the work until they stopped doing whatever it was that they were doing. For instance, one day we had a truck practically going up the disabled ramp at the playground. So when my husband and I came around in the car, they just didn't stop. Even calls to the precinct would not. I ended up actually going in front of the truck until they pulled out. So this is, this is how it's been down there. So that, I would urge you guys to go above and beyond what is currently being done, because it's obviously not enough. The park has been slammed with dust and odors and all kinds of, it's been like the Wild West down there with the trucks. And it's just not a safe environment for the kids, for anyone. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Laura. I ever since I've been working with the community here, I've heard these concerns over the trucks, and unfortunately, those fall out of the jurisdiction of OER. But you have my email, and I don't know what I can do, but you should send me an email and let me know this is going on, and I'll do what I can do to help to alleviate those unnecessary actions.
Well done.
Whose jurisdiction would it be to handle those complaints?
I mean, definitely the contractor's paying these truckers to do the job, and So I think that that's definitely the first place to look and make sure that the contractors are doing the job that they're supposed to and following the laws. You know, obviously PD.
So
If
inevitably,
there's
though, it
sidewalk
would be
closings,
Greenpoint Landing, that's
DOT.
developers. I mean, it's really the developers that we could communicate with, or does
I
Greenpoint
don't know,
Landing still
Greg,
have a
Eric, what do
liaison?
you think? You're hiring the truckers and bringing them to the neighborhood. I think that
That's correct. We are hiring the construction company and they're hiring the truckers, and we are responsible for their actions, and we will hold them accountable, and we'll work with a logistics plan to make sure that the impacts are as minimal as possible.
Would you also, when I think Laura says go above and beyond, would you also be willing to do sort of cleanup efforts in the streets and parks surrounding the site? You know, anticipating blown trash or, you know, styrofoam or materials or soil.
Mhm.
It's already a dumping ground, and as sometimes as we see when construction sites go up, they illegal dumping or, you know, truck washing may not be your trucks, but truck washings happen more often, and all that debris is just in the streets. So,
Yeah, housekeeping is already a requirement. Of course, certain things do fall and get blown past that. So certainly we will talk with our team and see what we can do to eliminate anything beyond anything that's required.
cool. But again, it's housekeeping outside of the site.
Understood. Yeah, so we'll talk with our plan and with our contractors and see what we can do to not only avoid it, but if it does happen, the logistics of any cleanups.
Is Greenpoint Lane, do you have a liaison? I know, you know, Peter was the previous liaison, and tragically he's not with us. But is there a new person who's handling working with the community?
I am not familiar. Peter is with.
He was with.
Who did he work for?
I'm trying to remember what the name of the firm was, but he worked either for Brookfield or
Kaiser.
For Kaiser, yeah.
Okay. We do not have someone identified. However, we can certainly talk amongst our team to see who might that be.
Unfortunately, that system hadn't worked because, for example, there was one particular day that comes to mind. I have a slew of photographs and emails that had gone out to the liaison at the time. And it took, I believe, about a month for the liaison to get back to me. And that was after many emails. We had a situation down at the park where there were, I would say, at least 7 huge trucks lined up to the point where you couldn't see the playground. I mean, you couldn't see the ball field from the playground, and the disabled ramps were blocked. The dust was so thick that I was able to scroll my name in the dust deeply, about a quarter of an inch. I have photographs of all of that. Those complaints were never answered. Never.
And to that point, I mean, I'm just very worried about Greenpoint Playground. I think Laura is too. And you know, if you're monitoring the air within the site, I think it's imperative that you monitor the air in Greenpoint Playground. You know, if children are going to be continuing playing there unless it's closed, which I don't recommend, but we have to make sure that it's safe.
So the way that we do the community air monitoring, we set up 2 stations, one that is upwind, meaning it catches whatever is coming onto the site, so we know what the air quality is entering the site, and we have a meter at the other side of the site where the wind is leaving the site. And there are trigger levels in the community health and safety plan, so that if these levels are exceeded, then certain actions need to be taken, from misting things down all the way to work stoppage and addressing the problem more systematically if it's a larger issue. So that would address any dust we don't anticipate any volatiles leaving the site, but any dust leaving the site would be seen by those meters. And we also have the person who is monitoring the at the location of the excavation, both dust and volatiles, and they'll see these issues first and foremost. So we have two levels of protection in that regard, plus the eyes and ears of the consultant on site to observe operations and ensure that this doesn't become an issue. We were able to use this system at the site adjacent to Transmitter Park, and we worked all summer long. They went across the street. I'm sorry, they went next door to the park and checked for residual dust on the play equipment. It was literally 20 feet away, and didn't have any issues. I think the wind blows east, so generally, so it's fortunate. But I think they just had a really good plan for dust mitigation there, and it worked out.
Yeah, Zach, I don't disagree. I think it's a little different here because at Transmitter Park there isn't a street where, as Laura was saying, like, and I live on West Street, so you know those 20 trucks that could potentially be lined up at any given time idly, right, sitting idle, the exhaust. So I'm not just talking about what's coming from the site. I'm talking about what's happening as things go into and out of the site. And so if you're talking about having trucks alongside Greenpoint Playground, which is surrounded by streets, unlike Transmitter, right? Transmitter is the construction was the street was slightly removed, and so it's a little bit more protected. Greenpoint Playground is fully exposed on all sides to those streets, and if it's surrounded by trucks, that's going to impact the quality of the air outside of your site, emanating from outside of your site into the site next door where children are playing.
I just know I'm part of the Friends of Transmitter Park, and I know people live next door, and that was one project where there was a real issue with the idling trucks very early in the morning, and creating kind of living hell for some of the tenants in 44 West. So, before Acacia, I see your hand is raised. If Zach, if you could email the board just all the contact information, OER contact, and for the contractors, environmental, and Greenpoint Landing, it'd be really helpful to have that, as well as a copy of your presentation.
Sure. That'd
be great. All right, Keisha?
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about a community liaison with the developer. We've experienced things going on at Newhart now with people not knowing anything that's been going on there. Signage is really important, that people know what's going on at the location. There are people playing at the playground and at the barge park who have absolutely no idea about the environmental issues that are going on. And so I think it's extremely important. I mean, when Peter was there, at least he was somebody that we could reach out to. And I understand, Laura, you had that problem with getting, getting feedback. I had a lot of success when there was a liaison, getting feedback and seeing results with things that we saw that were going on that were not supposed to be going on. So I highly encourage that the developer get a community liaison email and makes it public so that people can reach out, and signage on the chain link of both the parks so that people know what's going on across the street. Because if they don't do that, it's up to the community to laminate our own signs to talk about what's going on, and it should not be the community that does that. Our developer needs to act in good faith and say what's going on across the street so people can make educated decisions about whether or not they're going to have their children playing in those parks. So I just would appreciate a liaison to be brought on like we had before, and more communication. And that's it.
Thank you. We can certainly commit to more communication, but we'll have to go internally to discuss exactly how the liaison position works, and we will get back to everyone. And in terms of signage, we'll talk with that team as well. I do not know if we can put signage on someone else's property, but if we are able to, we can certainly work something like that out.
I think Katie could probably have something to say about that. We'll know something about that, but it needs to be somewhere so that people know what's going on. I just say the park because that's where people are. It's not as if it's anything is ever put up, outside of the site that really explains what's happening on the site. So that's why I say I'm sure we could talk to parks, but Katie maybe can help with that.
And I think North Brooklyn Neighbors has worked out agreements with developers for community liaisons, and with North Brooklyn Neighbors is a community organization that can work with you to come up with a way to communicate with the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just in relation to the communication, what came up at the last committee meeting is, unfortunately, what I understand is during this, environment, the remediation period, the agencies are not allowed to post signage like contact information. That the DOB prohibits that. Is that so?
That's true.
I just wonder if there's any way to include that information in the, that big blue construction signs that go up for, if you, problems with remediation, see an unsafe condition, contact, OER, blah, 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 construction, et cetera, if that's a way to, a workaround in lieu of not being able to post something physically there separately.
Yeah, I don't know if I think DOB dictates specifically what's allowed to be on the signs. So again, that would probably be something that the council member or somebody else could take up with DOB. That's they say you can only have these specific things up, and if they do have something that says unsafe conditions, but it tells you to call, 311, I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah, just I don't know if you guys were on the end of our committee meeting, but we're passing on a resolution to Mayor Adams to adjust that the building code, construction code, to allow agency contact information, especially for remediation contacts. So anyway, we've been on this item for a while. Does anyone else have any final questions or comments for OER or their team? No? Okay. So I don't know if there's really anything to vote on. I would just say, I think the message is, really, we had problems with other portions of the Greenpoint Landing construction in terms of dust and trucks and, encroaching on the playground, really. And, so you've mentioned some work over Transmitter Park. There was an issue with the trucks idling, belligerent drivers. Really get a handle on that. And I know we've got to, obviously keep an eye on that plume. Yeah, really important if you could pass on contact information to the board. Yep. So we have that in case someone contacts the board with an issue related to that. Well, thanks a lot for the presentation. I'm sorry. Katie,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I was trying to be quiet, but I would just say one more thing. I'm sorry. Is it possible for this committee, and maybe this is a motion, I don't know, I've never made one before, to officially ask the developer to put in air monitors in the parks around the site, potentially working with North Brooklyn Neighbors, who is monitoring. There's just a lot of air quality monitoring in this neighborhood because it's so bad, and I feel like the cost of that shouldn't necessarily be on the community organizations for something like this, that we're asking you to monitor that air. It's very important for the children who are playing there and for the people who are recreating across the street, to ensure that it's a safe public space. And so I was just wondering if that's something that this committee could potentially ask the developer to do officially, to install air monitors outside of the site in the public spaces that surround it.
Seems good to me. I saw a thumbs up from Laura. Other committee, I see a thumbs up from Trina. So, so I'll take that as a motion.
And I second Katie's motion.
All right, the motion is to request developers install air monitoring in the Greenpoint Playground.
Greenpoint Playground and Barge Park.
And Barge Park. To help, yeah. Okay, and I'm sorry, who seconded it?
I did, Trina. Wait, are we asking for the duration of the remediation or for the duration of the construction as well?
I was thinking the remediation in particular.
Okay. Jerry, could we please do a roll call vote?
Stephen Chetzler,
Yes.
Eric Berzatis,
Yes.
T. Willis Elkins,
Yes.
excuse me a minute. T. Willis Elkins,
Yes.
I can vaguely hear. Does anyone hear what he's saying?
Said yes.
It was
All
a
right,
yes.
thank you. Katie Denny Horowitz,
Yes.
thank you. Yoel Lowe, Trina McKeever,
Yes.
thank you. Janice Peterson, Bella Sable, Laura Hoffman,
Yes.
thank you. Kevin Costa, Daniel Grossman,
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. All right, thank you, your team for presenting and answering questions and addressing comments. So, we'll move right along to 1036 Manhattan. Jane, have you had any luck with your presentation sharing? Or
I emailed it to BK01. So if one of you guys can access it, or Scarlett, do you want to try and share it? All right, there we go. I can see it.
Okay, let me go to.
Yeah, can you just start at the first? Yeah, there we go.
on those fine detailed charts, if you could zoom in a little
Yeah,
bit.
we will.
Okay. All right,
And I will
thanks.
tell you, unfortunately, this particular consultant uses a weird font for their figures, so they're going to be a little bit difficult to see, but I'll give you the gist of it. And again, I sent you an actual copy of this PDF, so you should be able to zoom in and see it. So again, this is Jane O'Connell. I'm with New York State DEC. Also on the line is Scarlett McLaughlin and Jacqueline Nealon from the New York State Department of Health. Fortunately, Scarlett is able to share her screen, so she's helping me out here. We're going to give you a presentation on the Brownfield Cleanup Program site located at 1036 Manhattan Avenue. Next slide, please. If you could just zoom out, there we go. Okay, so I think Zach alluded to this earlier. A lot of these initial slides are identical to the ones that I did for the Broadway Triangle Site C, but I will go through them again for anybody who may have missed that. So summarize the presentation here. I will tell you about who the involved parties are, a little brief overview of the citizen participation program, an overview of the state's Brownfield cleanup program, which is very similar to the city voluntary cleanup program, brief history of the site, the environmental findings that we found during the remedial investigation, talk a little bit about some additional environmental sampling that is still ongoing. I'm going to give you a summary of the proposed remedial action, and then we can take questions and comments. Next slide. Okay, so the involved parties in the State Brownfield Cleanup Program, the environmental regulation is handled by New York State DEC. Public health regulation is New York State Department of Health. The remedial party in this case and the property owner is BK Corners LLC. and their engineering consultant is Hydrotech Environmental Engineering and Geology. Unfortunately, neither the developer nor the consultant is on the call tonight, so I'm going to have to try and answer any questions about that. Next slide, please. Our citizen participation program, again, is very similar to the OER program. We have periodic fact sheets that go out. The fact sheets are available electronically. You can sign up through your using your email, and you'll get a notice, and the fact sheets can come delivered directly to you. If you're interested in that, you just go on DEC's website and search for DEC Delivers. And in this case, we're talking about an IRM, an Interim Remedial Measures Work Plan. So that document and any other project documents are available online through the DEC info locator. That again is available on DEC's website. Next slide. So as part of the citizen participation program, we've established document repositories. One is the community board itself. The other is the Greenpoint branch of the Brooklyn Public Library. Again, those are physical paper repositories or electronic discs of the data and the reports. And we also, as I said, have the DEC info locator for an electronic repository. Next slide. So the Brownfield cleanup program, there's quite a bit of process involved. There is an application, and the application is subject to a public comment period that was done between February 17th and March 19th of 2021. The next step after the comment period on the application is to execute the Brownfield cleanup agreement. That agreement was executed on April 9th, 2021. After the agreement was executed, the applicant submitted a remedial investigation work plan, which was also subject to a 30-day comment period between May and June of 2021. And that investigation work plan was approved by DEC in July of 2021. The next step after that is the actual field work to collect the data. Again, it's soil, groundwater, soil vapor data. That process is still ongoing. They have completed the on-site investigation, but there is some additional off-site investigation that needs to be completed. So the applicant has elected to proceed with an interim remedial measure. The purpose of an IRM is to do sort of an expedited cleanup to address any potential sources and to try to deal with the initial source of a contaminant while they're continuing to do the investigation for the rest of the area. So that IRM is currently in the public comment period. As you know, that comment period ends on the 20th of February. After the comment period ends, we would make whatever adjustments or revisions to the work plan and then approve it. And then they would be out to implement the remediation. Next slide. So now a little bit specific about the property, about the site. It's a little less than a quarter acre property. It's a pretty small piece of property. It's located in an urban neighborhood, obviously. It is a single tax lot. It was formerly 3 separate tax lots that have been merged. The property fronts on Manhattan Avenue and Freeman Street. Next slide. So if you could zoom in a little bit there, Scarlett, please. The site is located on Manhattan Avenue on the southeast corner of Manhattan Avenue and Freeman Street. So it is adjacent to the Manhattan Avenue, the Manhattan Avenue. There's also, I think, the G train underneath Manhattan Avenue. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what I was talking about with the fonts. You have to zoom in. For some reason, the documents that they submit make it very difficult to read, and I apologize for that. But this is just to show you that the property is formally 3 separate lots, and it fronts on Manhattan Avenue to the bottom, Freeman Street to the left, and north is to the bottom left. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit about the history of the site. From 1949 to 1985, the site was identified as, on Sanborn maps as paints, which was not very clear what that actually meant. There was also a dry cleaner on one of the former parcels. And that was through 1985. From 1985 to 2005, they were just general commercial retail stores. Pardon me. 1951 to 2007. So again, these are the histories of the different specific lots. 1951 to 2007, the other lots were identified as paints and commercial stores. And then approximately 2020, the 3 lots were merged and the buildings were demolished and has remained vacant since 2020. Next, thank you. Okay, so the investigation, again, we approved the investigation work plan back in July of 2021. The consultant went out and started the field work in September of 2021. And during this initial phase of the investigation, they delineated the aerial and vertical extent of contamination, soil vapor, and groundwater on site. They delineated the contamination and groundwater off site. We identified a possible source of the chlorinated solvents that have been found in the groundwater and the soil vapor. And from those investigations, they've generated sufficient data to propose this IRM to address the on-site source. Now, there is still remedial investigation ongoing to delineate the off-site soil vapor. And that work is anticipated to be completed hopefully in the next month or 2. We wanted to try and get that sampling done before the heating season is over. Next slide, please. All right, this is going to be a tough one because again, you can't see these, but I will go through the data for you. Whether you can actually read these or not, it's going to be very difficult, and I apologize. So the initial investigation, well, rather the investigation for the on-site identified some very, very low concentrations of specific chlorinated solvents associated with dry cleaning, specifically tetrachloroethylene, which is also called PCE or PERC, and degradation products associated with that. So trichloroethylene, dichloroethylene, etc. They were only found in very low concentrations. They were actually found at concentrations that do not even exceed our unrestricted soil cleanup objectives. But there is enough there to make us suspect that there is a source somewhere. And similar to, for those of you who were on the call related to Broadway Triangle a couple of weeks ago, the soil vapor and the groundwater data are really the evidence that we have that there is likely an on-site source of these chlorinated solvents in the soil above the water table. The next 2 slides, again, are the semi-volatile organic compounds, metals, things like that. Those are associated with historic fill. We did find some of those. We did find a historic fill layer across the site that extends down approximately 8 to 10 feet below grade across the entire site. What you're seeing there, the green highlighted numbers exceed restricted residential, which would be the applicable soil cleanup objectives for the planned development here. The blue colors are exceeding the protection of groundwater soil cleanup objectives. However, we did not find the semi-volatile organic compounds in groundwater. So the applicable standards here would be the restricted residential. The next slide talks about the metals, pesticides. Again, the gray is exceedances of unrestricted, but we do not have any exceedances of restricted residential for pesticides. Next slide, please. Again, this is metals. What we were finding was some low levels of lead and other common metals that are found in historic fill. So again, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of exceedances of the restricted residential soil cleanup objectives. And again, the concentrations that we're seeing of these metals are indicative of the historic fill layer that we're finding. And the concentrations, there are no exceedances once we get down below that historic fill layer. So quite a few samples that went down into the native soil, we did not find any exceedances below that historic fill layer. Next slide, please. Pfas. Okay, so some of you may have heard of Pfas. What is Pfas? These are per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances. These have been in the news quite a bit lately. You may have heard of a place called Hoosick Falls, upstate New York. So these are compounds that they're man-made compounds. They were used in quite a bit of different industrial applications. We often find them in concert with the chlorinated solvents, the dry cleaning chemicals, because these PFAS compounds were sometimes used for waterproofing clothing. If you guys remember Scotchgard, that used to spray on your, on your shirt or your shoes to waterproof them. That's was essentially polyfluorinated alkyl substances. So a lot of times we will find the PFAS compounds at this, in concert with the chlorinated solvents. In this case, we really did not find any of these emerging contaminants in the soil, so that's good news. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to look at, these are the groundwater concentrations. And again, we're looking at specifically the contaminants of concern here are the chlorinated solvents, specifically tetrachloroethylene, trichloroethylene, dichloroethylene. And the groundwater nicely flows essentially in the same direction as the north arrow. So from the top right to the bottom left. And what we're seeing, if you can zoom in, Scarlett, on the right side of the site there. Okay, so MW4 and MW5, which are the farthest up gradient, those had low levels, generally low levels of chlorinated solvents, and the concentrations increase as you go down gradient. So if you could scroll over a little bit, Scarlett, down to that the well that's on the sidewalk on the bottom left there. Okay. So that well, so scroll up just a tiny bit so they can see where that well is located. Okay, so this MW9, this is at the farthest down gradient part of the property. And that was where we saw the highest concentrations of chlorinated solvents in groundwater. And they were mostly the daughter compounds, meaning that the tetrachloroethylene is breaking down naturally. So that what we're seeing, instead of seeing a lot of tetrachloroethylene at this location, we're seeing mostly the daughter products. So, and even the trichloroethylene is not that high, but the dichloroethylene and the vinyl chloride. So those are the compounds that we're looking at. Those are the compounds that we're concerned about. But when you get across the street, MW10, MW14, the concentrations drop off. And that's good news. That tells me that it hasn't migrated any further than that MW9, which is very close to the property boundary. Next slide, please. We might be able to go through these. We really didn't have much semi-volatile organic compounds, significant concentrations in groundwater. You just zoom out a little bit, scroll it on that. There we go. Again, not much to speak of in terms of semi-volatile organic compounds in groundwater, nor do we find pesticides, metals, or Pfas at high concentrations in the groundwater. The primary contaminants of concern here are these chlorinated solvents. So you might be able to scroll through to the soil vapor concentrations. Keep going. This is the vapor. Okay, so this is where, oh boy, this is going to be really hard to see. Zoom in on the top left, I believe, of the site is where we had the highest concentrations. Yeah, I can't even read this. Yeah, this is impossible to read. But what I will tell you is, we had some soil vapor, some high elevated concentrations of the chlorinated solvents in soil vapor on site and at the site boundary, which is why we are having this additional sampling being done off site to try to delineate. And where Scarlett's pointer was there in the top left, that's essentially where the highest concentrations were that we want to, we're going to do some additional investigation off site. Okay, next slide, please, Scarlett. I can't see what this is. Oh, this is the off-site vapor. This was the preliminary off-site vapor. There was one sample just out on the sidewalk closest to that highest hit. I don't know if you can read that, Scarlett, but we did ask them to do some additional off-site sampling to try to define where that soil vapor, whether it's migrating off-site.
Yeah, this text isn't any better on my screen than.
Yeah, I apologize. I'll get you guys a copy of the actual, well, you should have a copy since you're the repository of the actual report. It's clearer to see on the paper report, and I apologize that the electronic version is just not very conducive to being seen here. Let's go to the next slide, please. So Scarlett, I think this is where you're going to hop in for a couple of slides.
Right. I think that Jackie was having some technical difficulties. She got kicked off. I'm not sure if she's even able to do anything more than listen in. So Jackie? No, I don't think so. I'm going to just jump in for Jackie since she's had some problems with the presentation and the WebEx. So my name is Scarlett McLaughlin. I work with Jane O'Connell and other people at DEC. And Jacqueline Nealon is my Department of Health project manager for this site. Basically, our role is we work hand in hand with DEC to ensure that the nature and extent of contamination associated with the site is identified in the investigation, and to make sure we have enough information collected to evaluate whether people can come in contact in any way with any of the contamination there, to evaluate potential exposures. So we review all the reports, we evaluate the data, and then as we're looking at it, we make recommendations if there are any potential exposure routes to address them. And we also evaluate if we're going to need any additional information collected. In this case, when we had the on-site information that was collected, we evaluated it and determined that some additional investigation was needed off-site to see if there could be any potential exposures associated with soil vapor intrusion. Additionally, we worked with DEC when the remedy is proposed, to evaluate it and make sure that whatever is proposed is protective of public health and addresses any potential for exposure to the site contamination. So this may be a lot of, many of you have heard this before, but for those in the room that haven't, what is exposure? It's basically some sort of actual contact with a chemical or with a substance. So that can be through breathing, if the chemical is in the air. It could be through direct contact, if you're touching it, if somehow it's gotten on your hands, or ingestion, eating it or drinking it. Sometimes there's contaminated groundwater that's being used for drinking. Not in this area, though. In this area, it's public water, so the groundwater is not used for that. But basically, the main point here is that one of those exposure routes, one of those ways, has to be present in order for people to come in contact with contamination, and that's necessary. If you don't have any contact with it, then there's no potential for it to cause a health concern. But at the same time, contact doesn't necessarily mean there will be a health concern. A lot is based upon how you come in contact with it, what it is, what the chemical is, what it could possibly do. But from our perspective, we just want to evaluate if there's any way to come in contact with any contaminants and make sure that that's stopped if there is anything. We're getting feedback. Not sure. I guess if you're not
Scarlett, I think your audio is breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, there's some feedback. I've only got one audio on. Can you guys hear me better now? I think there's some feedback from another line. I don't know if somebody has 2 microphones on.
Yeah, I don't know. I can hear you now, though.
Okay, I only have a little bit more. So soil vapor intrusion, you may have heard us.
I'm sorry.
Was someone trying to? I guess like right now, try to get feedback.
Yeah, now you're breaking up again. Can you guys hear me clearly? All right. I mean, I Scarlett, if you'll allow me, I will try. I'll try to fill your giant shoes here. So this slide sort of talks about soil vapor intrusion, which is one of the common ways that exposure can occur. And it's the process by which the chemicals, volatile chemicals, can get into an occupied space from the subsurface, right? So one of the things that we look at is soil vapor. One of the ways that we look at it is exposure. I think we talked about this a little bit on the Broadway Triangle site. What is soil vapor? How, so picture a bunch of marbles in a glass, right? That's what soil is. There are spaces between the soil particles, and in those spaces is air, or these chemicals, these volatile chemicals can get into the air. So what can happen is that can move into indoor spaces. It can also move from contaminated groundwater up into those indoor spaces. Is that it? Did I get it all, Scarlett? I think so. I'm not a health professional, but I play one on TV. All right. You want to go to the next slide? All right, so I think Scarlett already talked about this, the potential exposure pathways. There's inhalation, there's direct contact, there's ingestion. And part of the thing that Department of Health does is they look at each of those exposure pathways for each of the media that we investigate: soil, groundwater, soil vapor. And those pathways have to be addressed in whatever remedy is selected. All right, next slide. And this is Jacqueline Nealon, who's the DOH project manager. This is her contact information. And again, that's in the presentation that I emailed over to you, Stephen, so you can share that with folks. All right, so next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the actual proposed IRM that we're talking about for this site right now. So again, it's similar to the remediation that Zach was talking about at his site. We're going to be going a little bit deeper here. We're going to be removing, excavating and removing all soil that exceeds restricted residential soil cleanup objectives in the upper 15 feet beneath the basement of the building and the upper 2 feet in the area around the edges of the building. And we believe that that's going to get out the source of the chlorinated solvents that might be in the soil. They're also going to be treating the groundwater using an in-place, in situ bioremediation. There will be an active subslab depressurization system installed on the new building, and a site cover system will be installed as well. And similar to all of our remediations, and as Zach said, all the OAR sites, we do a health and safety plan, a community air monitoring plan throughout the remediation process anytime that there's ground intrusive activities. Next slide. Okay, so this excavation plan, again, on the left is Freeman Street, on the bottom is Manhattan Avenue. So the proposed building is actually going to take up, I think, the entire site. But because of the MTA's, the subway in Manhattan Avenue, they have certain setbacks for their basement. So the white outline is where the basement is going to be. And the white outline will be excavated to approximately, as I said, 12 to 15 feet below grade. That yellow box is going to go a little bit deeper. That's going to be an elevator pit. The green area is a sloped excavation. So in other words, another thing that they're not able to do is put in sheeting and shoring along Manhattan Avenue because MTA won't let them. They won't let them drive any piles adjacent to the subway tunnel. So what they're going to be doing is from grade, they would be digging down at an angle to get down to that edge of the white, which is going to be 12 to 15 feet below grade. Then the purple area in the back, that's a 2-foot excavation back there. But again, we believe that the former dry cleaner was sort of in the lot that is right under where your cursor is, right there. I'll go up to the right of the yellow box is where the former dry cleaner was. So that's the area that's going to be dug down below the source area to remove that. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is the area they will be doing injections. And again, this is along Manhattan Avenue and at the corner with Freeman Street, where we had the highest concentration in groundwater. We'll be doing injections to treat the groundwater and essentially dechlorinate the chlorinated solvents to render them inert. Next slide. The cover system will extend around the property outside of the building foundation itself. There will be a cover system that will consist of concrete or asphalt. I don't believe they have any landscaping or anything like that. And then finally, there will be a subslab depressurization system that will be installed beneath the building, but outside of the basement, because the bottom of the basement is going to be below the water table. So there's no place for vapor to accumulate below the basement. So the subslab depressurization system would be outside of the basement level. The next couple of slides are details of the SSDS. I don't think we need to talk about those. Yeah, these are like plan details, things like that. So again, the public comment period runs to the 20th of February. after we have evaluated any comments that we get from the public, revise the document, we would approve it. This Stephen and the other folks on the committee here, you may be familiar with the 421A tax abatement program. This is another site that is looking to vest for the 421A tax abatement program. So they need to get some foundation elements in the ground before June 15th of this year. So they're planning to start this work, the excavation work, in March of this year. And then again, they're still doing the off-site investigation. Once that is complete, we would get a comprehensive remedial investigation report and a draft remedial action work plan. Now, in this case, because this interim remedial measure is a substantial part of the on-site remedy, unless we identify any off-site impacts that need to be addressed through some other remedial action, the final remedial action work plan could be a no further action remedial action work plan, meaning that the IRM has addressed all of the exposure pathways, has removed the source of contamination, and is going to be the final remedy for the site. But that remedial action work plan, when it is submitted, would be subject to a separate 45-day comment period. Okay. Next slide. Okay, I think that's it. I'm ready for questions. And thank you for hanging in for 2 hours. I appreciate it.
Oh, hey, we got another important one out of the way. Thanks again for the presentation. And yeah, I think it would be helpful if on the as you're going through the 3 soil, groundwater, soil vapor, I guess it was a soil vapor, I guess some of the most intense contamination. If we could know specifically in that corner, which chemical compounds they were, and the levels, or just.
I believe it was either tetrachloroethylene or trichloroethylene was the dominant contaminant in the soil vapor.
Okay.
The numbers off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but they were they did 2 rounds of sampling in that corner.
Mm-hmm.
The first round was done, Scarlett, I want to say like 3 years ago, maybe. And those concentrations were very, very high. They were in like the 10,000 micrograms per cubic meter range, which is relatively high.
Right.
They did go back and resample. I want to say this would have been in November of this year. Okay. And they were not able to duplicate that concentration. Now, that could mean a number of things. Soil vapor is a very amorphous creature. It moves where it wants to, when it wants to. So it's hard to say. We're assuming the worst, that the concentration that they found 3 years ago is what we're dealing with, and that's the remedy is addressing that particular concentration.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah, I guess it is frustrating that the developers, the representatives of the developers aren't here to talk about, trucks, truck traffic, truck routes, timing, et cetera. There's a very active bike lane on Manhattan Avenue and on Freeman. So we have to figure out how to best try and extract that information from them, and to get, read them the riot act on that, like we did with Greenpoint Landing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I will tell you, we haven't had our pre-construction meeting with them. Usually, again, the excavation contractor will subcontract for the trucking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if they've selected their excavation contractor yet. So in terms of, the truck routes are established by city DOT. They're supposed to follow them. This is a rather small site. I wouldn't anticipate more than 10 to 15 trucks a day. I just don't think that they're going to be able to excavate that much that quickly. But once we, once the contractors put together what's called a site logistics plan, which will say where the access and egress to the site will be, where the stabilized construction entrance will be, and they will also be able to give us an estimate of truck traffic. So I will certainly reach out to the consultant and the developer tomorrow and let them know that you were interested in that information.
Yeah, if they could forward that to the community board as soon as possible, that would be great. And then one more question for me is related to, I guess, call it that hot corner on Freeman, I guess, in the upper, I could be the northeast corner. I guess what I'm thinking about is, in terms of, I guess, how the soil vapor becomes permeated with a chlorinated solvent in a extensive way. So basically the chemicals, I guess, flow downward and permeate the vapor, or does it enter the groundwater and then the vapor migrates up into the soil, and then soil vapor
Yes.
thereof?
Yes and yes. It can happen both ways. So volatile chemicals are so like, when you fill up your gas tank, you go out and you put the little thing in the gas tank and you say, oh, it's got that little ring and I shouldn't smell anything. But when you start pumping the gas, you smell gasoline, right?
Right.
That's it. Volatile compounds will disperse into the air, and they will do it in the air around us. They will do it in the air underground, the spaces between the particles, the soil particles. But it can come from either contaminated soil, the chemical will volatilize off from the contaminated soil, or it could come out of contaminated groundwater and volatilize off of that.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess could the substances migrate off-site, say, further and under other buildings?
Yes, it could, and that's why we're having this particular applicant is what's known in our program as a participant, as opposed to a volunteer. A participant is required, is obligated to investigate both on-site and off-site, and remediate on-site and off-site. So one of the reasons we're having them do this additional investigation off-site is to see whether or not there are potential impacts in any neighboring properties, whether there is migration that is occurring off-site. And if there is, they're going to be obligated to remediate that.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I ask is, a couple of years ago, we went through a whole process with residents who lived on Freeman, closer to McGinnis, mostly, experiencing vapor intrusion in their residences. I don't know if the actual substances were actually identified, but is it conceivable that some of these chlorinated solvents could work their way, down, in that direction and under their buildings?
Yeah, I recall that that was Laura. I believe you guys were working with Randy Austin on that. I believe that was determined to be petroleum, though. That was like gasoline vapors. This is a very different. It has a different odor. It's not, and I believe those odors were coming from gasoline that had gotten into the sewer, and then the vapors were finding their way in through the sewer connections into people's buildings, as I recall. But the answer to your question, Steve, is yes. Is there a potential that there's vapor going off-site? That's what we're trying to figure out by that additional investigation. One thing I will tell you, though, and some of you may know this from our experience over at Newhart, we can request to access people's property to do the sampling that we need to do. They don't have to give us access. So I don't know that we've gotten to that point yet. I don't want to, say that we haven't gotten access, but that is something to keep in mind. We do need to access people's private property potentially. They don't have to give us access to do that.
Right. Okay. All right. So I guess in the event in this additional investigation, that there are some things are flagged off-site, then, you know, what kind of process would be triggered after that?
So, and I sort of alluded to that in my last slide, which is after the additional investigation, they still have to get us a comprehensive remedial investigation report. So what they've given us now is a report for essentially the on-site contamination. The comprehensive report has to include all of the data collected on-site, all the data collected off-site, and then the DOH and DEC review that data. And if there is, if we see the need for additional remediation above and beyond what is proposed here for this IRM, so for example, off-site mitigation, assuming we can get access, that would be addressed in the remedial action work plan, which would be a separate work plan submitted subject to 45-day public comment period. And that would be additional remediation done on top of this IRM that's being proposed right now. Does that answer your question, Steve?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Okay, that's enough for me.
Steve, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Laura, sorry.
Laura has both of her hands up. Laura, you're muted now.
Sorry, thank you.
It's all good.
Yes, I'm very concerned about this this site. First of all, I just want to ask if we can have a readable copy of this presentation. And,
I'm going to do my damnedest.
Okay. And I'm a bit concerned about the words rush, you know, because of the 421A program, because I like I said, I have a lot of concerns about this site. Yeah, this issue with the sewer vapors wasn't actually finished in my view. It was just that COVID happened, a lot of things happened, people, you know, weren't complaining, but yet I've seen messages, I've seen posts on Facebook saying that people still do have those sewer vapor issues. Now, for the people on this call that don't know, at 212 Freeman Street, at one point there were explosive levels of sewer vapors, and I was CC'd on quite a bit of those emails with Randy Austin at that time. The problem wasn't 100% resolved. So I'm very concerned what's going to happen, you know, when things get shaken up, and, you know, how much interaction is DEC and DOH going to have with the tenants that actually live on Freeman Street.
Interaction in what way?
Outreach. But when you're talking about explosive levels of sewer vapors, I believe there should be outreach.
Okay, right. But again, we may be talking about apples and oranges. The vapors, as I said, I think the vapors that we're getting in were a combination of methane and gasoline. I'm not aware that we've gotten any more complaints about that, Laura. And if you're aware of that, I think we would certainly like to know that. I believe Randy and his team had tracked down the source of that gasoline to an old gas station. I don't know the location of it. But you know, I'm not aware that that was still an ongoing problem. This is kind of the first time hearing that it's still an ongoing problem. So I'd certainly like to hear from you and anybody else, and we can engage with Randy on that and his spill team. But in terms of engagement with the community on that, yes, we can, you know, DEC will definitely, you know, follow up on that.
I mean,
if there's an issue for it.
I still have a few emails from, you know, email addresses of people that definitely DOH and DEC should be reaching out to that, you know, they had primary odors in their buildings. And just the fact that I don't know for a fact that this ended, I'm concerned about that because I had been following this issue very closely, and I'm not aware of the same that you are. So
yeah, and Laura, I will tell you, I think
I'm sorry, just the fact that there were explosive levels there at one time, and that that I do see messages and things about ongoing problem. I think the agencies themselves have a responsibility to be doing some kind of outreach and getting those people involved.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Laura. I will tell you that we were dealing directly with the tenants, you know, and again, it's private property, so I think we were being careful not to publicize, you know, people's information. But we were having direct contact. Randy and his team, the City Department of Health, City DEP, who regulate the sewer systems themselves. We're having direct outreach with those affected tenants. But certainly, I will follow up with Randy tomorrow when I'm in the office and see if there's have been any further complaints or any other issues.
It might not be a bad idea for DEP to do a little checkup on the sewer lines there either.
Right. You'd have to reach out to DEP directly. I mean, we don't regulate the sewers. DEC doesn't regulate the sewers. But if Randy has already, you know, again, Randy may already have contact people at DEP. I will follow up with him on this, and I'll ask him to get back to you.
Yeah, Jane, it's Rodney.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Rodney.
DEP did do some flushing of those sewer lines back at that time, because there was sludge buildup that was causing a lot of the odors. The cause of the sludge and the buildup was never determined, actually. But yes, DEP had done some flushing of those lines. Whether they've done any checking lately, we need to follow up with Randy. But there has been no recent complaints, to my knowledge, either.
Related question, do the chlorinated solvents on site, or do they emit an odor?
In high enough concentrations, it'll smell kind of sweet. If you've ever been walked into a dry cleaner, and that kind of sweetish odor, and I don't mean Swedish like Swedish massage, I mean sweet-ish. So it's a very distinct odor, or distinctly different from gasoline or petroleum, but it's kind of a sweet odor.
Yep, I know what you're talking about. Yep. All right. Does anyone else have questions or comments? Okay.
I have a question. You mentioned the developer putting his piles down so that he can become eligible for the 421A plan that's going to expire. Is he being allowed to do something potentially reckless because the investigation's not finished? I mean,
No. I want to just say something. The only reason we are even considering or contemplating this IRM is because we feel that they have completely delineated the on-site contamination, and that the remedy that they are putting forth for the on-site is comprehensive and protective. We would not allow them to move forward with this were we not convinced of that. Again, the issue is they've put together a very comprehensive remedy here, and in fact, we were initially going to notice this as the full remedial action work plan. The only reason that we pulled that back a little bit is because they do still have to do some additional offsite investigation and try and delineate where the soil vapor may be going. But that would not affect the on-site remedy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could the chlorinated solvents somehow enter the sewer system?
I get conceivably, sure. But there would have to be a pathway for them to get in, right? So I'm not sure whether the sewer system in this location is below the water table or above the water table. I don't know what the condition of the sewer system is, but there has to be a pathway for the contaminants to get into the sewer.
Right.
Um,
And just to piggyback that, Jane, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
The contaminants here are basically going to take whatever the pathway of least resistance is. So generally they would move around in the subsurface in areas of looser soil or gravel or whatnot. And it's not as likely for them to go into a sewer line itself. They tend to more accumulate underneath buildings or impervious surfaces. And not be as big of a problem that we've seen within sewer systems themselves. But certainly the bedding around them, we have seen them at higher concentrations at times, just because it's a little bit looser and there's more airspace for them to move through.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. I don't know, Laura, do we want to, as a committee, take any action? Do you think, as far as the, outreach to, residents who experience vapor intrusion, or just, maybe, that entire block between McGinnis and Manhattan?
I absolutely think there should be outreach. I think it has the potential to be a dangerous project if that's not checked up on.
It's gonna be like, physical notices, and, I mean, Jane, did you compile some sort of contact list of these residents on that block and nearby?
I believe so. I'd have to check and see the specific. Usually our site contact list includes everyone within, I want to say, a quarter mile of the site. And so the initial fact sheets would have been mailed to everybody on that site contact list, but I'd have to look and see what the specific addresses are.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, maybe just amongst, as a committee, we'll discuss if we want to create any resolutions, et cetera. But Jane and Scarlett, thanks a lot for speaking with us, presenting with us. Yeah, if there's any way, I don't know if whoever created the presentation, if they could re-render it with a different font, or
Yeah, I'll work with the consultant to get this updated, and I'll get it out to you as soon as I can.
That'd be great. That'd be great, because
Sure.
we prefer, attaching it to our committee report if possible.
Understood.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, well, Laura, do you think, do we want to, pass a resolution related to communication? Or just, feel like we've made it clear enough that we really like the agencies to reach out to the residents?
I think it's probably a good idea for a resolution.
Okay. Okay, so for DEC and DOH to reach out to residents in the vicinity of 1036 Manhattan Avenue regarding the this about to begin interim remedial remediation, and with contact information. Does that sound like that would nail it?
I think so.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to that effect.
I'll second it.
Um, okay, Jerry, can we do a quick roll call, please?
Sure. Steve Chesler,
Yes.
Eric Berzatis,
Yes.
T. Willis Elkins,
Yes.
Katie Denny Horowitz,
Yes.
Yoel Lowe, Trina McKeever,
Yes.
Janice Peterson, Bella Sable, Laura Hoffman,
Yes.
thank you, Kevin Costa, Daniel Grossman,
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Steve, you're muted.
My God, so bad with muting tonight. Thanks. Yeah, regarding the CSO outlet at River Ring, 105 River Street, which we discussed the last meeting, something we want to explore further. Potentially like bring in River Ring and their agencies to talk about that, what they're considering, what the ramifications are. I did speak to somebody offline that the consideration is to extend it beyond the ring that they're constructing, so it would flow in the the central main part of the river. But I guess we need to verify that. So maybe our next meeting we can discuss that further. And I'm trying to think. There's one other thing. Fortunately, yeah, I think that's it. I think just one other thing about with the last meeting with the resolution that we passed regarding the DOB signage rules. I think during the full board meeting, suggests that make a motion. Not only basically the motion was to express our disconsternation with the law, but I want to add to it, during the motion that they want them to change the rule to allow agencies like DEC and DEP, OER to post safety and contact information. So just a heads up to that. I'll bring that up at the full board meeting. Oh yeah, just a heads up about, there was an email exchange regarding 83 Apollo Street. I believe that's where there's a homeless shelter that's going to be developed. And so I think just considering it's near this small kind of pocket of residents, that may be one we want to look at. But hopefully we can schedule a meeting. We have, meetings that are a month apart and not 2 weeks apart. I don't know, we'll work on that. We'll let you know about when we potentially schedule a meeting about that. But if we were to consider a monthly meeting, I was wondering if we like the last week of the month, potentially like the last Monday. I believe SLA has their meetings on is it last Tuesday or Thursday? I'll work that out, with the board office
Usually Tuesday, Steve, for SLA.
Yeah. So, I'll explore it with the office, but potentially if we had a meeting on, let's say, the last Monday or the fourth Monday of the month, it seems like we're getting, a lot of volume. Just to pencil those dates in. Because usually the first week of the month is pretty jammed with about 3 or 4 committees. And then we have the board meeting. So, all right, well, there's not there are any objections, so I'll explore that and, let you all know about that. So, so I think that's it. Does anyone else have, that was, I guess, the old business was River Ring. And the new business was 83 Apollo. So I guess that's it. We'll adjourn.
Steve, while we have DEC here, what do they have a protocol regarding extending these deadlines that we spoke about earlier?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, if we had, you know, as you mentioned, our review cycle is generally 30 days. And by the time a notice is released, you know, we're already into a week. And so generally, I think we need more like 45 to 60 days to do a, you know, a full cycle. So would DEC, and I see Zach, you're still on OER, potentially, you know, if we're recommending, you know, when even we're not recommending something significant, if we just, you know, have potentially the time to review and either, you know, submit comments beyond the deadline or have deadline extended to make room for that.
Our review is statutory, so that would be a longer term revision that we would have to undertake of our regulation, the rule that governs our program. And that's definitely above my pay grade. I'll bring it back to the office.
I think I'd say the same thing. We've got our comment periods are set in the statute, and we can extend them only for you know, has to be a substantial reason. But you know, we have certainly accepted comments after the comment period ends. There's just no guarantee that that you know, if you get them in too late, that we're not going to be able to address them. But you know, it's something that there has to be a substantive reason why you're asking for the extension.
Okay, so we can take it on a case-by-case basis, potentially, if something arises. And I think, and I guess we'll notify you and, you know, see what we can do. But I mean, you run into this with other community boards who have a similar cycle that, because I know it's like one of the I think it was for 83 Apollo, I think a week went by before the board received the notice. So we, you know, essentially only had 3 weeks to review that. So I'm just wondering if you're getting feedback from boards that maybe there needs to be a, you know, larger window for the CBs to respond.
I actually have not, but I will say that there's not a lot of community boards that are as active as you guys are, so kudos to you. But Steve, you know, if you don't get the notice in it timely, you know, that's a basis to ask for an extension, right? But we send everything out electronically now, so we have, you know, back in the day when we used to only do mailings, paper mailings. We had occasions where, you know, a community board or an elected didn't get it for a week, and then they requested a week extension, and we extended it for a week. But that it's unusual for that to happen.
Right.
Steve, this is Shiminder here. For Apollo Street, I can make it through March 3rd, which is 30 days from today.
Our board doesn't meet until the 8th. So it'd be possible to go let's see, the 8th.
Yeah, I'll check their schedule and maybe I'll get back to you tomorrow on that.
Okay. William, you're feedbacking there. So, okay, well, that I would appreciate that on 83 Apollo, and I appreciate that going forward. But I guess we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. If there's something that we feel requires, you know, a significant requesting a significant change or comment, to ask for an extension. So, all right. Well, thanks, Jerry. I knew there was something else.
I'm just curious, is that for state DEC, is that regulated by state law or agency policy?
I believe it's actually in the statute. The comment periods are established in the the Brownfield cleanup law.
All right, so that's something we could take up with the state elected officials too, Steve.
Okay, Jerry, that's great. Okay. All right, we'll follow up on that one. Okay, no, thanks again, Jerry, for, all right, everyone. So thanks again, Zach and Scarlett and Jane and everyone for doing the double meetings, the 2 meetings, 2 weeks apart. And yeah, I don't know if the volume keeps up, might be seeing, more of each other. So
I'm gonna have to get a better camera, Steve.
the land gold rush here. So, all right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Steve.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.